So nice to see everybody. Thanks for joining us for the shiur. So tonight's topic is one that's related to Shavuot. I'm just going to mute you all, and then if you need to talk, if that's fine. And then mute all. There we go. If you need to talk, just unmute yourself. But I assume you can hear me. Okay. Great. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Hello, Rabbi Ronnie. Oh, you're the iPhone. That's very clever, very anonymous. So tonight's topic is to do with Shavuot. Shavuot obviously is the festival where we commemorate, celebrate the receiving of the Torah, which we renew every year. For some people, it's not the most one of the most fun festivals, or one they don't know about much, because we're not in a sukkah, we're not eating chametz, we're not blowing the shofar. All we're doing is eating cheesecake. But it's actually a very, very important festival. And tonight we're going to talk a bit about the festival, but the focus will be on actually receiving the Torah and what we actually received on Shavuot. So what we actually received. So a lot of people think we got the Torah, we got the commandments. What do we actually get on Shavuot? So tonight, hopefully, all will be revealed. Although having said that, there are many different opinions about it, and we'll try to touch on some of those as we go along. The first thing, and I've got a few slides to share with you and some papers that Rabbi Ronnie here prepared as well, which are helpful, and some other information which I've pulled together. So I'll try to share my screen with you as we go along. But that's really the topic. And when we get to the end, we'll also discuss some of the customs of Shavuot, and we're going to try to do that in an hour. But first and foremost, I think the most interesting discussion and something that's really important to our everyday life as a Jew is, what is the Torah? What's it made of? Because we know we have the written Torah, we know we have the oral Torah, we know we have rabbinic law, we've got customs, we've got things that people make up along the way. So we're going to discuss all that, where it all came from, what it's all doing. I'm going to try and share with you a screen, and I hope this works. Let's have a look here. You guys along. Can't find the folder that I kept it in. Here it is. Okay. So this, and I hope it comes up on your screen now. It might take a while to open. Okay, we'll rotate it so you can. Okay, so here's a nice little diagram. You can all see it? Paul, you can see it? Give me the thing. Yeah, good. So this is a nice little diagram about what is the Torah all about. And as you can see, we've got here there's a written Torah. Now, the written Torah is pretty obvious what that is. That's the 5 books of Moses. It's what we read every Shabbat when we're in Shule. It's most old book in the world, or so they say. The written Torah, the 5 books of Moses with everything written down. But very important also is the oral Torah. The oral Torah is all the rules and all the laws that are connected to the written Torah. And both of them were given by God. These are all part of God's Torah. The oral Torah is not something that the rabbis made up or anyone made up. It is all part of the tradition. It's all part of what we received when we got the Torah. And they go together. You can't have one without the other. I mean, there are some, sort of sects of Judaism and some religions who just believe in the written Torah. But for us, Orthodox Jews or Jewish people, they go together. You have to understand them both together and learn them both together. And we will talk about that in a bit more detail in a moment. But coming from that, we've also, as you can see by this diagram, we've got the halakha on the left. The halakha is obviously Jewish law. So the way we follow our everyday life, the laws of just daily life, living, waking up and davening and praying and putting on tefillin and mitzvot. There are monetary laws, there are civil laws, there are temple laws, and there's lots to talk about. That's the halakha. And as you can see here, that's written down in various sources. So this is just a very general overview, but we'll go into a bit more detail in a minute. So you can see the Mishnah, the Tosefta, the Talmud. So this is obviously a Talmud shiur, a Talmud for everybody. And the Talmud is really, the Mishnah and the Talmud are our oral law. So that actually sets out every single law that we know about, and it's all contained in there. And of course, there's commentaries down the bottom as well, legal responsa. On the right side here, and this is just an overview, we'll go into more detail, is the Agadah. So the Agadah is commentary It's not legal material, not halakha. Some people think of it as stories, but generally it's non-halachic Jewish way of life. I guess that's the best way to explain it. It's a commentary on the Torah as well. It does contain stories, and sometimes they make sense and sometimes they don't, because a lot of them are more parables or allegories to actual things. So usually when you quote a midrash or an agadah, it needs a lot of explanation just to understand what that is. And the Talmud is full of agadah. So often we go through a piece of Talmud, and besides learning the normal laws of keeping Shabbat or whatever the rules are, it will also go through stories, and it might be a story of the Tanaim, it might be a story of some esoteric thing, and there is always an explanation. So we never just take it at face value. And then down the middle here, we've got ethical writings, which is just about ethics. So that might just be, the way we live and about our character building, about what's right and wrong. Because obviously you can follow the Torah and still do wrong things. That's about how we do right. There's the mystical writings, the Kabbalah, and that is the deeper meanings of the Torah. And sometimes we touch on them. We talk about souls, and we talk about the future and Olam Haba and the next world. But some of them are even deeper than that. And general normal people, like most of us on this call, I say most because I don't know you all very well, but for most normal people, we don't really study the Kabbalah. We can read books about it and we can hear talks about it, but the actual Kabbalah is really left to the great rabbis who have studied really everything first before they go into the mystical side of things, and they can understand it properly. And of course, the word Kabbalah itself, it means receiving. So you can't just open a book and learn the Kabbalah yourself. You need a teacher to teach it to you. So you've got to find a Kabbalist who will probably, make sure you know what you're doing first, and then teach that to you as well. And there's obviously philosophy, there's Jewish philosophy, and there's, you can go into goals, and there's nearly everything's translated. But you can see here, so let's go back up a second. So as we know, sorry, just pull up my document here. So just going back a second, the written Torah we know is the 5 books of Moses, right? But we also know the concept of the prophets. There's Tanakh. So there's, Joshua, which is the leader that took over from Moses. We talk about the book of Judges, so all the judges of Israel. Then the prophets like Samuel, the kings, Isaiah, Jeremiah, who talked about the destruction of the temple, and they warned us about people. So they're all the prophets, and we read that every Shabbos after the laying in the Haftarah. We have Ketuvim. So Tanakh is made of 3 words. There's a Torah, Nevi'im, which are the prophets, and Ketuvim are the writings. And that's obviously things like Psalms, which are like praises of God, Mishle and Kohelet, which are the thoughts of King Solomon, King David, the Song of Songs, Shir Hashirim, and then there's the Megillas like Ruth and Eicha, which we read on special occasions. So that's all the Tanakh. Then we've got the Mishnah here, and that's made of 6 books. 6 books of the Mishnah, if you know the song, 5 of the books of the Torah, 6 of the books of the Mishnah, you know that one. So 6 of the books of the Mishnah are made up of Zeraim, which talk about agriculture. Zeraim actually means seeds. So in the good old days when we were all farmers, that was really important. There's Moed, which is about all the Yontovs. There's a book of Nashim, which are the male-female relationships, and talks about things like adultery, levirate marriages, even taking vows and who can annul vows. Then the 4th book is damages, so civil damages. The 5 one's about Kodshim, which is about what happens in the temple. And book 6 is Tahara, purity. So it talks about what becomes Tamei and Tahor. They're the 6 books of the Mishnah, which is actually quite short form. If you just read a Mishnah, you won't get everything. Then you go into the Talmud and you go into the Gemara, and that's really pages and pages. And that's really when people say they learn Torah, a lot of the focus is actually on learning Gemara and Talmud, which is really the oral law. And we'll talk about why the oral law is now in a book. That's going to come a bit later, because that was probably your question. If we have an oral law, why is it written down in a book? But really, the Gemara is the oral law. And if you go to any standard yeshiva around the world, or any high school, Jewish high school, where they're learning Torah, they'll have a curriculum which is basically Torah, Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, and Talmud. They'll spend a lot of time at Talmud. And my boys who are in yeshiva overseas spend all their day learning Talmud. And they go into very, very detail about it. They spend hours preparing, and then the rabbi gives them a lesson on it, and will bring a Talmud from this book and that book, and a deeper meaning and this meaning, and usually they spend about 4 hours afterwards trying to work out what he actually said. And that's what they enjoy. They love it. And it is very enjoyable because you're really getting to the truth. And I'm going to mention this in a second. When we study the Talmud, even though it sounds like you're lots of arguments, you're actually getting to the truth at the bottom of things. So, and that's what I really want to talk about tonight. So I'll just show you this page here. This is Ronnie kindly put this together. He told me he hasn't reviewed it for 5 years, so I don't think anything's changed. I don't know. But you'll see on this page here, there's something called the Gaonim. The Gaonim lived in the 7th century to 11th century. And they wrote halachot. They took the Talmud and they wrote the Talmudic discussions out. And then these are the two that we really study a lot, which are the Rishonim and Achronim. So you've probably heard the word Rishon in Shule. You know, when we call up people for Rishon, means the first call up. And the Achronim are the later ones. So there's the earlier ones and the later ones. And these are the post-Talmudic scholars. So after the Talmud was written, which, I don't know the date. What the date? I think was it 200 CE, I think it was written, or maybe 500 CE. Then all these commentaries came about it, because if you think about it, the Talmud is really a book of discussions and arguments between lots of different people. And anyone who just reads it goes, okay, well, that's nice. I know what Rabbi Ravashi says, I know what Ravina says, I know what Reb Meir says, but what's the answer? What do I follow? And the Rishonim decided that they're actually going to write it down for us, so that they write down the code. So you'll see one of the first Rishonim in that middle column from the early 11th century. And they were the first Talmudic scholars. And one of them was Rabbi Nagel of Mainz. And then you can, and Rabbi Hanano. And these are actually printed in the actual Talmud. When we learn the Talmud piece, they're on the Talmud. And you can look at all the other ones there. Won't go into that, won't go through everybody, but you can see the different ones. There's Rif and the Shmuel HaNagid, who wrote the introduction. There was Rashi. Everyone's heard of Rashi before. He's one of our foremost commentators from France. And he was a brilliant mind. And really today, we don't learn anything without Rashi. You can't even open a Chumash without learning Rashi, because Rashi just tells us everything. And then you can see some French scholars. There's one in Egypt, which is Maimonides, the Rambam, which we've discussed many times. And he wrote the whole Mishnah Torah. He codified all the laws. And that was one of the first codifications of the laws. Then you can see some French and German ones. Reb Meir of Rottenburg, quite a famous rabbi, which we discuss quite often. And then we go the Smag, the Sefer Mitzvah Gadol. So all these rabbis wrote out the halakha. And then you can see Nachmanides, the Ramban, who was from Spain. Anyone who's been to Girona in Spain will have gone to his city and his shul. I think it's Shule, or the museum's got parts of his shul anyway. And so they're the earlier scholars. So you can see that they're from Spain, they're from France, from Germany. And of course, the last one there listed is the Sefer HaChinuch. The Sefer HaChinuch was an interesting one because the Rambam did it too, but he actually wrote out the 613 commandments and the reasons behind it to the extent we know them. And it's really interesting because he can list out in each parasha, he lists out all the mitzvot, and he explains or gives some commentary about that as well. And then the Achronim are the ones that you may have heard of a bit more commonly, which is a Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo, who actually wrote sort of the daily laws. Shulchan Aruch means a set table. So he basically set it out for us. And you can see some others who also wrote summaries of the halakha. There's one in 19th century Hungary, Rav Shlomo Gunsfrey, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which is a shortened version, and then the Aruch HaShulchan. So they're all the ones that we study today is the Shulchan Aruch, and of course the famous Chafetz Chaim, who also wrote the Mishnah Berurah, which is really the book you go to. If you ask a rabbi a question about what you do, you really go there and look in the Mishnah Berurah. But of course, these halakhic decisions keep going, and even 2 weeks ago when we were discussing technology, right? Rabbis today are still writing halakha out. They're writing responsa, they're called, to what's actually going on. So this is really the things that we study when we learn about the oral law. So going back, there's a written Torah, the oral law, and then there's the halakha. So there's the Mishnah, which is codifying or the written, it's the oral Torah that's written down, and then the Talmud, and then all these commentaries, right? All these commentaries. What's interesting about these commentaries is, and this is what they study in yeshiva, and I always find this interesting, is that when they wrote the commentaries, they really were very specific about the words they used, to the extent that if they used one word instead of another word, they did it very specifically. Nowadays, you know, we write an SMS or an email, we just write junk, right? We just write, the more words are better. If you're a lawyer, the more words are better. You can charge more money, right? But in those days, every word they wrote was specific and intentional. And in fact, sometimes you can make a whole discussion on why the Rambam wrote one word here and a different word there, and it sounds like they contradict each other. And that's really part of the discussion, the study of Torah. Now, this document here is what Ronnie put together, which really goes through all the different track and all the different topics that are discussed. And I know that it's a bit backwards here. I'll rotate it for you. You can see there, this is really, you know, how detailed it gets. It just goes on and on and on. So this, you know, it takes years to learn through all this. And some are more relevant to others. You know, for example, the laws of agriculture, not so relevant nowadays to us, because unless you're an Israeli farmer on a kibbutz, we really don't have, we don't really harvest wheat much, we just buy it. But having said that, it's not so true, because we do get a lot of products from Israel, and it's really important over there as well. But we're not going through all these laws now, but this is really, you know, this is how long it goes for. You can see every single topic's mentioned. So the Torah is very comprehensive. It deals with everything, really deals with everything. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and welcome you back. So that's quite interesting in terms of background. But really what I want to mention tonight is, what is this oral Torah we keep talking about? And I said before, it is written down. What is it? When did we get it? And how does it relate to the written Torah? Okay. So the first thing we have to know is that we got our oral Torah at Mt Sinai 3,300 years ago. It's not something that we've made up along the way. It's not something that the rabbis created. The oral Torah is actually the Torah. Now, in that oral Torah, we have the 613 commandments. When did we actually get the real Torah, the written Torah? And that's up for discussion, because I'll tell you in summary when we got it, but then we'll go back to it in more detail. So in other words, on Shavuot, when we say we received the Torah, we actually did not get the real Torah then. We didn't get the written Torah. We got the 10 Commandments, and we'll talk about that. And we got the oral Torah. So the oral Torah is really probably there first. Now, the oral Torah is not like an afterthought. It's not like the Torah is unclear. We're not sure what the verses mean, therefore we need the oral Torah to explain it. It's actually all part and parcel of the same thing. Now, there was a gentleman that went for a job interview once, and he applied for the job, and on his resume it said that he studied law at Harvard. And the interviewer said, "Oh, that's really good. Do you remember Professor Lee at Harvard?" He goes, "No, don't know him." "What about Professor Jeffords?" "No, don't know him." "What about Professor Nagel?" "No, don't know him." "Professor Siegel, Professor Koch?" "No, don't know any of them." He goes, "Did you actually go to Harvard? How do you not know these professors? These are like world-famous professors." He says, "Well, to be honest, I didn't actually attend Harvard, but my roommate, he went to Harvard Law, and I just read his notes. So what's the difference? I read his notes, and therefore I've got the same degree as him." So obviously he didn't get the job, or I hope he didn't, but you can see the difference, right? What's the difference? Anyone who's been to university or done a course knows that it's very different to read something and to hear something from a lecturer. So when you hear it, you can understand it. The lecturer gives his personal experience. He can give the nuance. He sees what his listeners are talking to. You can ask questions. If he says something ambiguous, you can say, "Did you mean this or did you mean that?" You can ask questions. So you get a lot more out of lectures. If you just read something, it's like open to interpretation. You may have missed something. Not everything is actually written clear. So when you hear something, there's a lot more information being provided. You can ask questions. When it's written, it's very limited. It's written to the words on the page, and that's all you're going to get. There's no context behind it. It might just be a summary. You might have made not a typo, but you know, it's very specific. So I just put you all on mute, a bit easier. And that is why, for example, the oral Torah, which is now written down, is so much bigger, because there's so much more to give. Now, having said that, and anything, the oral Torah is so much better because it's written. It's verbal. And why is it better? Because it means that my teacher taught me the Torah, and I was in the room at the time, and I asked questions, and I got it clarified, and he gave me context, and I could different scenarios. You know, what about this? What about that? if the oral Torah is so much better, or oral lectures, why do we have anything written down? That's because we do need a reference point. But really the Torah, the main thing is oral. And then it was transmitted from generation to generation. The whole purpose of the oral Torah is it was passed on from teacher to student, from parent to child. And also because it's oral, it can cover off so many different cases. You can explain it in different ways. When it's written, it's like, tell me the law of Shabbos, and I'll just write, keep Shabbos. Oh, that's very easy. But if I say, oh, no, you can't do this, and you can't do that, and you can do this, and you can do that, you can start discussing it like we've done the past 2 shiurim. Now, the oral Torah is also, besides being a very broad range of laws, built in that oral Torah is also the fact that there are rules of how to interpret it. Hi, Melanie, of how to interpret it. So it's not just like here's a bunch of rules. It's actually guidance in there about how to apply it for different scenarios. So the oral Torah is never meant to be at a certain point in time. It was meant to carry on for generations and to apply in every generation to the way we're discussing it. So just to clarify, if everything was written, it would be open to interpretation. And you know what Jews are like with interpretation? It means that everyone's going to interpret a different way. So when the Torah says rest on Shabbos, well, to me that means lying in bed for 24 hours. To you, that might mean not going to work, right? To Harold, it might mean sitting on the golf course all day, right? Everybody has a different interpretation of what relaxing and not working is. And that's why it's not good enough just to say the Torah says keep Shabbos. You need the oral law to explain what it is. And as I mentioned the past 2 shiurim, we know that work on Shabbos means the 39 categories of work. Right? It doesn't mean running around the block, which is work but not work, right? It's not Torah work. It means there's 39 categories. Also, just to remember, the Torah is not an encyclopedia. So many of you know Encyclopedia Britannica, right? The old thing that's set on our shelves. Right now we use Wikipedia, whatever that thing is on the internet. But an encyclopedia is there to reference. It sits on your shelf, and when you need something, you look it up. That's what an encyclopedia does. It's like, oh, let's look up the indigenous people in Australia. So you go to I in the Encyclopedia of Indigenous People and you read all about it. Right? The Torah is not meant as a reference book to sit on your shelf. And one day if you say, oh, let's look up how to do a funeral, you pull it out of the book, right? Or I want to know how to pray, you pull out of the book. The Torah is meant to live with us. It's a way of life. Everything we do on a daily basis, even if we're not involved in spiritual matters, if you're just going to work, right? The Torah governs how you go to work. You have to be honest. You can't rip off your customers. You can't mislead people, right? So the Torah is not a reference book. It's a living book that lives with us. And that's another reason why it's not good enough just to have a book written on the shelf that we pull out every Shabbos and read it and put it back. It's something that we live with every day, right? Yeah, so the written and the oral, as I said, is the basics are written. The oral is really everything else. The oral must be taught and discussed. That's the main purpose of it. Now, I keep talking about oral, but I confused you before because I showed you the books that it's written in, which is the Talmud. Now, because of turbulent times in history, really the transmission got a bit risky. In other words, people were dispersed around the world. We had things like the Holocaust and, over and before that even the Inquisition. It got a bit scary when things happen around the world and this transmission might have been disturbed. So Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, I think it was 500 CE or whatever the date is, someone can correct me if they look it up, decided that it's a bit dangerous to just have oral. We need to write it down. And that's why he wrote down the Mishnah, the 6th Mishnah, because he said it's supposed to be oral, but really I'm worried about the generations are going to write it down. But he did it in very short form. If you look at the Mishnah, it's really short. So, it might just write one line. So to the average person in those days, maybe it made sense. But to you and me, who are just average people, one line is not going to help us. And that's why the Talmud came along to have all of those discussions. Now, anyone who's attended one of our Talmud for everyone, shiurim, and been through a piece of Talmud, or if you just know about the Talmud, knows that the Talmud is full of arguments, right? It's absolutely full of arguments. You won't open a page or read a line without going, Rabbi Hillel said this and Shammai said this, right? Yehuda said this, Meir said this. Every single word in the Talmud is an argument. And the question is, well, that doesn't sound very good. How can our Torah be argued? Is this divine law, or are the rabbis making it up and arguing? So I'll give you a good example, which is you might laugh about, but that's okay. I'm happy for you to have a bit of a laugh, and that is the laws of wedding. So everyone who's attended a chuppah knows that there's certain things you do at a wedding, right? You have to have a chuppah. obviously you need a bride and a groom, right? You need a chuppah. You have the yichud before. You have the kabbalat panim. You have the veil of the bride. You have the ketubah. You got the rabbi's speech. You got the breaking. Like, basically, the ceremony wherever you are, at an Orthodox one at least, is the same. Okay, so usually the rabbis have the same jokes wherever you are in the world as well, which is a bit of a problem. But generally, the weddings are all the same. Now, in the Talmud, it's pretty clear what has to happen at a wedding. But there's actually a number of pages that goes on about the value of the ring that the boy has to give the girl, right? So everyone knows we give the nice wedding ring now. It's a gold wedding ring, and it usually costs a few $100s. But in fact, in order to get married, you don't have to give a ring worth a few $100s. The ring can actually be worth about 5 cents or 10 cents. And the rabbis actually spend pages and pages working out what is the minimum value you can get married with, right? Is it 1 cent or is it 10 cents? And they discuss it. Is it a pruta? A pruta is like a 5 cent coin. So don't tell anybody this. You can actually get married with a 5 cent coin, and that's good enough. You don't have to worry about these gold rings, right? Although now, obviously, that would never fly, because if you offered the color a 5 cent ring, should probably throw it back in your face and walk away and find someone else. But the fact is, the rabbis spend pages discussing what is the value that you can get married with, and you're thinking, what's the relevance, right? So you can imagine sitting in like a rabbinical college, right? There's the rabbis with beards on this side, the rabbis with beards on this side, and they're going, yes, a chuppah has to have a collar, a chosen, a chuppah, a veil, right? And they agree on everything, the wording. But suddenly they spend 3 days arguing about the minimum value of the ring. What's going on? It doesn't make any sense. So, but I think that shows you a lot. And that is, the fact is that even though the Talmud is full of arguments from beginning to end, they don't argue about the main points in law. In other words, we know that a chuppah has to be run like a chuppah. We know that Shabbos has to be kept. We know that you have to give tzedakah. You have to put tefillin on. We know all the big things, right? We know we have to pray. It's little they're arguing about, right? And that's really important. And why are they arguing about it? Like these rabbis sitting there discussing a chuppah, couldn't they just say, you know what? You say 5 cents, I say 10 cents. Let's make it 7.5 cents, and everybody's happy. Why don't they do that? And the answer is because we always want to get to the truth. A Jew always tries to do things properly. And you can even see it in real life examples. I mean, if you look at the US, right? How many millions of people do they have there? 300 million people. They basically have two political parties, right? They've got the Republicans and what's the other one? Whatever they've got, right? In Australia, 17 million people. We've got Labor and Liberal and all the little parties behind it, 2 parties. You go to Canada, there are 4 parties. Okay, wow, it's a bit bigger. All right. Italy has 9 parties. Look at Israel, a tiny country, 6 million people, 17 political parties. It's unbelievable. Now, why is that? Why can't they just sort of agree and at least have 2 parties or 3 parties? Why 17 parties? And that's because Jews are very into believing. If they have a belief in something, they fight for it. They really fight for it. And really, that's the point of this oral Torah and the Talmud. What they're doing is saying, we know all the fundamentals. We know what's going on. We understand that the Torah requires us to run a marriage this way, to run Shabbat this way, to run our prayers and our shuls this way. But they want to do it properly. And they're arguing about the minutiae. They're arguing about the little things just to get it right. That's really what they're doing. So you'll never find a fundamental disagreement. Is there a God? Is there not a God? Everyone agrees there's a God. Is there reward? Is there punishment? Everyone agrees, right? It's the little things they're fighting about. And it's only to get to the truth. That's all it is. We want to get to the truth and do things the best way possible. So you might say, it sounds a bit crazy, but that's really what we're trying to do. That's what Jews are all about. And because now we know that the fundamentals are right, and wherever you are in the world, and if you're Sephardi or Ashkenazi or Litvish or Hasidic, the fundamentals are there. We're arguing about little things, right? The fundamentals are there. I can be confident to tell my children, and you can tell your children and grandchildren, and the rabbis can tell their students, don't worry, the fundamentals are there. This is the Torah, this is how it's been transmitted. We can argue about the little things, but that's okay. The fundamentals are there. And that's really the important part of what we're all talking about. Melanie, these are some of the questions you asked me the other day, by the way. I'm addressing some of them, but we can talk later if I haven't addressed them properly. Now, so does that make sense, everybody, by the way? Is that good? So in summary, what we've got now is we've got the written Torah, which is a short form reference book to an extent. We've got the oral Torah, which is extensive, covers everything. And we've got the oral Torah, which is now written, but it keeps on going. In other words, it doesn't stop at a certain point in time. Last week we discussed technology. The oral Torah will talk about technology. Now, it might not talk about it with the word technology. It will talk about it in its old concepts, but it can be used to be applied nowadays as well. And that's what rabbis do. When you ask them a question, they're interpreting it. And even as far as today, when we've got this corona thing flying around the world, do we open shuls? Do we not open shuls? Do we save lives? Do we take risks? Should we open a shul and take a risk? Does the Torah let us take a risk? Should we stop people over 70 coming to shul, or should we not? There are lots of questions, and the Torah deals with all these questions. In fact, these have been dealt with already years ago. In 1920, when they had the first pandemic, or the first modern pandemic, was the Spanish flu, whatever they called it, rabbis are already discussing it then. So we're using some of their already interpretation then to apply today now as well. Now I'm going to share with you another screen, and I just want to show you something interesting as well. I'll see if you can see my screen. I want to show you that one. This is a copy of a chumash. Now, as you know, in Kilda Shule, when we open our chumash, we usually use the Hertz. And as you know, in the Hertz chumash, there is a bit of commentary. There's a translation, a bit of commentary down the bottom. And so this is a Hebrew version of a chumash. You can see it in front of me. Everyone can see it. Len, can you see that? Good. So inside the middle here, you can see my mouse. That's the Torah, right? This is Parashat Vayera. So this is a standard page of a chumash. I'm just showing you the different things that we can see on it. This here on the left is Onkelos. Onkelos is the Aramaic translation. And we know that one of the translations was actually when, I think it was the Romans, I'm not very good at history, but I think it was the Romans decided that they thought there was things in the Torah that they didn't like. So they got 12 rabbis in a room, and they separated them in isolation, and they made them translate the whole Torah into Aramaic. Just to test to see, if they were giving the right translation. And so this remained with us today, this Onkelos translation. And in fact, it actually does help us understand the Chumash sometimes. On the bottom here is the famous Rashi. Now Rashi, as you can see here, it's a bit of funny writing. Rashi has his own sort of style of writing from the printers. But Rashi goes through nearly every word in the Torah and explains it. In fact, sometimes we can't even understand a piece. If you think about the Chumash as a reference book, sometimes one word can teach you, these 10 lines of Rashi here. So he explains all that. This is another book I'm just going through now, and these are all the commentaries on the Chumash. A lot of these commentaries here, all these highlighted bits, this is what our Rabbi Ronnie has put together. He's just taken a page here and showed you all the different commentaries on every single word. So there's different Yonis and Ben Azil, Ibn Ezra, the Ramban, the Nachmanides, Kleyakar, or Achayim, and each of these commentaries bring their own sort of ideas to it. And sometimes they quote the oral law, sometimes they quote Kabbalah, sometimes they quote a gematria, numerical value, a bit of a novel interpretation. We know there's a tradition that every single word in the Torah can have several interpretations. Now, again, we're not arguing about the fundamentals. We're not saying, did God take us out of Egypt? Did not God take us out of Egypt, right? We're not talking about that. He took us out of Egypt. The question is, did we go through, was the sea done in tunnels? How did the Egyptians drown? A lot of the details in all these commentaries here. And you can actually see here as I flip through, there are hundreds of commentaries. Here are some in English that you can open up every week and read through the Chumash. And really what they've done is here, as you can see me flipping through it all, there's this commentary after commentary about the Torah. And again, we are not talking about fundamental differences. We're talking about different approaches to the Torah and how it works for us. So it's always really interesting. And in fact, most rabbis, when they give their sermon on Shabbos, what they try to do is find a commentary that no one else has heard of before and interpretation on it and share it. And you might not realize, but often, we say things and it's someone else's interpretation. Now, the truth be told is if you do bring an interpretation from somebody else, you shouldn't really quote them. It's a nice thing to do. Just like you can't plagiarize other people's work, you should really quote other rabbis. But sometimes rabbis try to be smart and they just try to make it like it's their own interpretation. But that's okay. We're only doing our best. But really what we're trying to do is use the Chumash as a reference book and try to make it relevant to everybody. Try to make it relevant to today. And you'll notice, like as Rabbi Glasman gives sermons, or if I'm talking, or Rabbi Figdor's talking, or whoever's talking, or if you go to Torah anytime on one of your apps on your phone, every rabbi will come up and from the same word can come up with completely different interpretations of it and how it's relevant to you. And that's what makes the Chumash and the Oral Torah so amazing, because it's not a static document, it's not a reference book, it's actually relevant to us all today. And that's what's really important. Now, hopefully I've explained there what the oral and the written Torah is. We are about to come to the festival of Shavuot. Now, Shavuot, we always say it's the festival we receive the Torah. Well, what does that mean? We receive the Torah. What do we receive? Do we receive the written Torah? Do we receive the oral Torah? Do we get the 10 Commandments? What did we actually get? Now, I'll show you, I'm going to share something else now, which is, let's close this. This is another chronology from Rabbi Figdor. See, I'm quoting my source. Okay, so you'll see here what we've got here is a calendar of based on the Talmud. It's a calendar of the Jewish people, and as you can see here, it starts here the 15th of Nisan, right? Anyone know what that 15th of Nisan is? Pesach, right? 15th of Nisan. Here's the firstborn killed, and this is all their journeys around. See here, traveling here. The splitting of the Red Sea was here on the 21st, right? Got that one? And we're going to move all the way down to here's Nisan, Iyar, right? Sivan, here we go. So we've Sivan, this is where we're about now. We're about here on the calendar. And as you can see here, the 6th of Sivan, it's in red here, called the Aseret HaDibrot, right? The 10 Commandments. And that's what we all think about. Now, so we know that 3 days before the 10 Commandments, Moshe goes up, he tells the people to separate from their wives. He puts a border around the mountain and says, keep away, don't come up the mountain, only I'm allowed up here. And on the 6th of Sivan, or some say the 7th, but we're not going to go into that much detail, the 6th of Sivan, which is what we keep as Shavuot, Moses came down the mountain. But what do we actually get on Shavuot? We did not receive anything on Shavuot. We did not receive anything physical, I meant. What we got was actually God telling us the 10 Commandments. And just before that, we know that there's a Medrash, we'll go to the Medrash, the Agadah. The Medrash tells us that God went around to all the other nations and said, who wants the Torah? Who wants the Torah? So he started with the Greeks. Greeks, do you want the Torah? And they say, well, what's inside it? And it says here, don't be immoral. And the Greeks say, we don't really like that one, This is the ancient Greeks, probably, not the modern Greeks. Ancient Greeks, look, immorality, it's part of our society, not for us. God says, okay, not for you. Goes to the Romans. Do you guys want it? What does it say in it? It says, do not steal. Stealing, we like stealing, it's part of our tradition, okay? Goes to all the other nations. And, do you want the Torah? And they all say, what's in it? They don't really like it, they say no. It was only the Jewish people that said that did not even ask God what's in it. They said the famous words, Na'aseh v'nishma. Don't worry, we're going to do it. No matter what it says, we're going to do it. You can tell us later what it says and all the details, but we're just going to do it. They immediately said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will accept the Torah. Because they did that and they said, Na'aseh v'nishma, God was very excited. So Moses went up the mountain, he came back, and the Jews heard the 10 Commandments. In fact, God only said the first 2 commandments to them. He started saying, I am Hashem, Lord your God, took you out of Egypt, don't have any other gods. And the people just couldn't handle it. They didn't know what to do with themselves. It was too much for them. So what they did was they said to him, they said to God, please don't talk anymore. Our bodies cannot handle such a great voice, big, powerful voice. So Moses ended up saying the rest of them to us. But on Shavuot, what happened was we only received the oral rendition of the 10 Commandments. That's all we got. We didn't receive anything. Once we accepted it, we said, great, we've got the 10 Commandments. By the way, there is tradition that we also got the oral law on that day, so we got all 613, but we only got the verbal 10 Commandments. That's all we got, verbal. Moses went back up the mountain, right? He says, okay, guys, stay here. I'll be back 40 days later. So far, we've got the oral Torah, which is the main one, all the 613 commandments, which Moses learnt. We've got the rendition of the 10 commandments, and we've got Moses disappearing for 40 days, right? And we know the history, right? The Jews miscalculated. They said, where's Moses gone? He's died. No God left. What did the Jews do? They said, hang on a second. We really need something to pray to. So they said, oh, we've got a good idea. We've got all this gold. Let's put all the gold together and let's make this golden calf, right? And they made the golden calf. Now, we know they mucked the dates up. So Moses did come down 40 days later. But when he got down there, the mountain, he was holding his the two tablets. And he looks down the mountain. What does he see? He sees the golden calf. He says, what's going on here? I leave you for 40 days and you're serving idols. That's crazy. I told you the second commandment, don't serve any other gods. And here you are, bowing to a golden calf. And we know what he did, right? We've all seen the movie, right? He broke the tablets, right? Charles Heston broke the tablets because he got really angry with everybody. Right, the Jews felt really bad about themselves. So what date was this? This is 40 days after Shavuot. So let's go through the history again. Shavuot is the 6th of Sivan. We heard the 10 Commandments. Na'aseh v'nishma, yeah, we want it. He goes back up to heaven, comes back 40 days later. What day is 40 days later? It's the 17th of Tammuz, right? Which we know is a very sad day in the Jewish history, just before Tisha B'Av. And that's the day, the fast day, the destruction of the temple. It's a bad day for us. That is the day that Moses broke the luchot. He broke the tablets. Of course, what we did was we repented. We said, we're sorry, we didn't mean it. We made a mistake. Please, please take us back. Moses asked God for forgiveness. He says, fine, I'll take you back. He goes back up the mountain for another 40 days, comes back down 40 days later. Anyone know the date when he came back? What's 40 days after the 17th of Tammuz? Tammuz level. It is Yom Kippur. So he comes down on Yom Kippur itself, which we know is also a Shabbos, and he brings us the 10 Commandments, the actual tablets. Now, so what do we get on Shavuot? We got nothing. We got the oral tradition, the oral 10 Commandments. We got the 613 Commandments. We actually didn't get anything, right? He goes back up the mountain, comes back down, golden calf, breaks it, goes back up the mountain, Yom Kippur comes back down, we have our tablets. So actually on Yom Kippur is when we got the tablets. And that's a really important date. So you're going to say to me now, well, when do we actually get this Torah scroll, right? When do we get the Torah scroll? Now, what's interesting about if you read through the 5 books of Moses is there's actually parts in history which happened after the giving of the Torah. For example, going in the wilderness for 40 years happened after the Torah. So it's basically a bit difficult to get the Torah when it hasn't happened yet. So, I'm happy to share, there's a document later that Ronnie put together which goes through different opinions about how it happened, but I'm just giving you one opinion. And one opinion is that when Moses was up the mountain, he wrote the whole history until that point in time in the 5 books of Moses. As he was going along the desert and as things happened and different miracles occurred and they fought the Plishtim and they went through, all their 40 years of wandering, he actually was writing it along the way until he got to when they're about to enter Israel. As we know what happened, Moses wasn't allowed to enter because he hit the rock. And that's when he stopped writing the Torah. And as you know, the last few lines of the Torah is actually Moshe dies, right? So he writes, and Moshe dies, and he goes up the mountain. And so the big question is, well, how did he write that he died if he's dead? How does that work, right? So there are different opinions. And basically what one opinion is that, as I said, Moses is writing this Torah the whole way through. And as he got to the last 6 lines, God's saying to him, okay, here are the next 6 lines. Moses, you're about to die. Write that down, right? And the Midrash tells us, one opinion is that he was crying and his tears wrote the Torah, obviously in a miraculous way, and his tears wrote it. Some say Yehoshua, his student who took them into Israel, wrote it as well. So actually he didn't write the last 6 lines. But what's important to note is that the 5 books of Moses was actually a book written along the way, dictated by God. So Moses didn't write, he didn't make it up himself. Sorry. God, just gonna mute you there. God actually told Moses what to write, and he wrote it along the way. So let's go rewrite history in our own mind, because I guess for some of you this is new. It was definitely new for me when I studied this as well. Shavuot, we did not get a scroll. We did not get the tablets. We got the 10 Commandments from God himself and Moses. We accepted the Torah, Na'aseh v'nishma. Moses goes back up, comes down, breaks the luchot, goes back up again, brings the luchot, and he has the scroll with him, which is partially written. He's only got part of it in history written. But as he goes along history and he moves along to Egypt, he writes more and more and more until he gets right to we're going up to Egypt, and then he writes the Torah scroll. In fact, the actual Torah scroll we have today was written as Moses died, as you're about to enter Israel. which is quite interesting. And on that day, in fact, 13 Torah scrolls were written. It's not exactly clear how that happened. Some say Moses wrote 13 scrolls, which would have been quite a lot of work for him. Each tribe was given a copy of the Torah, and one was obviously put into the altar as well with the Mishkan, the tabernacle. And as we know, inside the Aron, the ark, with the cherubs on top, inside that little box there is the tablets. So the tablets are in there. Next to it was your old Torah. So that is really a history of what we got. So when we get to Shavuot this year, we're going to know that we didn't receive the tablets today. Today, the Jewish people decided we are going to accept the Torah, Na'aseh v'nishma. We're not going to ask questions. We're going to ask questions later. We're going to accept the Torah. The actual 5 books of Moses was written along the way and only received much later on when we went into Egypt. But what you can see from here is the importance of the oral Torah, right? This is not just, we can't just take the 5 books and go, that's the Torah, right? Anyone that reads the 5 books and says, I've learned the Torah, I know all the rules, is not telling the truth. It's not right. You need the oral Torah with it. In fact, the oral Torah was probably there first. And they need to go together. And for the reasons I explained below, the oral Torah is so important because that is what we actually pass on from generation to generation. That is what is like going to a lecture. You can't just read the textbook. It doesn't work. Anyone who's gone to college knows you can't open a textbook. Although I remember there was a friend of mine who was a Jewish head of Yiddish Kop, a Jew, who I never attended lectures, and he was smart enough to open the textbook in an exam and get A's. I don't know how he did that. But for most normal people, you do need your lecture notes. You need the oral transmission to understand it, and you need the reference book just to remind you. But you need them both together. But what's important is that even though today the oral Torah is is written down, it is still oral because there's so much in there that is not written. And the main thing that's not written is the way to interpret it to today's events. So what's happening today? So modern day technology, not written in the oral Torah, but the rabbis use it to interpret it and to give us answers for it. Now, I'm going to share with you one more screen and do this in 5 minutes. It's a really interesting piece of Talmud, which is really important for Shavuot and something that will give you just a different perspective on what actually happened. So this one is called Sources. What I'm going to show you now is actually pieces from the Talmud. So this is the oral Torah, right? So now we know what the oral Torah is. Sorry, I'm just opening it now. My word is a bit slow. You probably can't see it because I can't see it either. But, oh, there it is. Okay. So firstly, this is, can you see, Carmel, can you see that? I can see your face. Can you see it? Yeah, perfect. So this is actually a Talmud that discusses how Moshe thought in his own mind to break the tablets. Why did he think it was okay to break the tablets, right? And basically he decided for himself to do that. God didn't tell him to do it. He decided that that just like the Torah says you can't have any other gods, and the Jews went against it, they basically rejected the whole Torah. And he said, if you're going to reject the whole Torah, I'm going to break the whole thing. That's really what he said. This is what I want to show you. Okay, Na'aseh v'nishma. So you can see here, Rabbi Sinai taught, when Israel accorded precedence to the declaration, we will do. They said, Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will hear. 600,000 ministering angels came and tied 2 crowns to each and every member of the Jewish people. One for we will do and one for we will hear. Okay? What's really important is the fact that we use these words was really exciting. This was really a nice formulation of words. We were so excited, the angels themselves came down and said, we are going to reward you with these 2 crowns. No one knows what these crowns are. We can spend hours discussing it and use our mystical side of things. But the fact is, we did something right. By not asking questions and saying, we will do, we will listen, we will do, we agree, we got these crowns on our head. Okay, that's one Talmud. Now, this is another piece of Talmud. Rabbi Nagel said, when the Jewish people accorded precedence to the declaration, we will do, we will hear, so we're going to do it, then we'll listen later, a divine voice emerged and said to them, who revealed to my children this secret that the ministering angels use, right? So on the one hand, you can see this Talmud that says the angels are really excited that we use these words and they gave us crowns. The next one says, how dare we use these words? This is like some deep secret up in heaven. How dare these human beings use the words we will do and we will hear, right? So that in itself is a bit of an interesting discussion. Like were the angels happy or not happy? But here's another piece of Talmud, okay? Another piece of Talmud. This is really interesting, right? This one says that the Gemara cites another homiletic interpretation. The Torah says, and Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the lowermost part of the mountain. So in other words, the Jewish people stood at the bottom of the mountain. But listen to this. Rabbi Avdimi said, Bar Chama Bar Hassa said, Jewish people actually stood beneath the mountain. And the verse teaches that the Holy One, blessed is He, overturned the mountain above their head like a tub, like a bathtub, and said to them, if you accept the Torah, excellent. And if not, there will be your burial. Right? So in other words, this is very interesting. On the first two Talmuds, it says that the Jewish people willingly accepted the Torah. And now we're saying that God held the mountain over our head and basically forced us to accept the Torah. Right? Do you see a contradiction? On the one hand, they're excited we accepted it. On the other hand, he's saying, no, he forced us. Right? And basically, what's interesting is that we learn from here that the Jewish people could actually claim that, hang on a second, we were forced into this. We didn't have to agree to it. If we don't like it, we can just say no, right? So on the one hand, we're accepting it. On the other hand, God is actually saying to us, I'm forcing you, right? Now, there's different interpretations of this, and this is something that you can actually not make one up yourself, but you can take away what you want from it. On the one hand, you could say that that what's actually happening here is that we agreed to the written Torah, but we didn't agree to the oral Torah. We said, oh, look, we'll take the written one. Looks a bit easier, but the oral one, too much. 613, too much for us. Too many books, too many words, too hard. And God says, no, I'm forcing you. You need to take this oral Torah as well. And he forced us to take it. That's one interpretation. The other interpretation is that when you accept something, you can always revoke it, right? So I'm going to go and I'm going to go out with you for dinner, right? Yeah, I'll go out for dinner when the restrictions ease, obviously. Yep, Harry, you're at the top of my screen. Harry, you and I, we're going to go out for dinner in 2 weeks' time. And the night before, it's like, actually, I can't be bothered going out for dinner with Harry. Harry, sorry, I'm not feeling well, got a headache, pulling out, right? People do that all the time, right? When you accept something, you can always pull out. So if we accepted the Torah and we said to God, Na'aseh v'nishma, well, listen, it's very easy to go, you know what, I don't know, I've got to change my mind. You know what I said, I didn't mean it. I want to change my mind. What God is actually saying to us is, no, you accepted it, but I'm actually forcing you to accept it. I'm forcing you to accept it. Now, what does that mean he's forcing us to accept it? This is what's crucial here. This is the main message. The message is that God actually said the reason this world exists and the reason the Jewish people are in there is to keep my Torah, right? And what he's actually saying to them is, I'm holding this mountain on your head to show you. I'm sending you a message. The message is that I know you accepted it, and I really appreciate it. And it's really nice. And here's 2 crowns to say thank you very much. And it's a very deep secret that you've said. But what I'm actually sending you a message is, I'm holding this mountain on your head because if you don't accept it or you don't keep it, I'm going to destroy you. Not because I don't like you, because the whole purpose of the world ceases to exist. The whole world was created so the Torah can be followed, so the Jewish people would be the chosen nation, and we would bring the Torah to our people and to the world. We would make the world a better place. We would, teach the world the ethics of the Torah and the philosophy and the morals and the laws, right? We're not saying everyone else to keep it. We're going to teach it to them. So God was actually saying, I'm very nice you accepted it, but I'm basically forcing you to do it because if you don't keep it, I'm going to destroy you all and destroy the world. There's no purpose to the world. And that is a deep, deep part of our faith, which is the whole world was created for the Torah and for the Jewish people. In fact, the first words of the Torah, Bereshit bara Elokim, right? If you go back to Rashi, the interpretation, we all say Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Very nice. Everyone knows that. But actually, the word is really weird. It should say in the beginning, Barishon. In the beginning, God created. On the first day, created. What do you mean Bereshit? The word Bereshit is a very, very strange word. And Rashi tells us on the spot. The first thing Rashi says is actually Bereshit means the Torah. The world was created for the Torah. That is what we believe. So the festival of Shavuot, just to recap what I'm saying is, it is a time we accepted the Torah, right? And we said, now Nishma, we willingly accepted the Torah. But God's actually telling us another important point, which is actually, even if we didn't accept it, or even if we did it when we stopped, the world is created for us to do it. So he thanks us for accepting it, but he's saying that us and the world are all connected inside, and that's really important. So that is the message of Shavuot. Now, when we get to Shavuot this year, that is something we remember. There are many customs to do with that, and it's all interpreted. But just remember that as we accept in the Torah, there are two parts, the written and the oral, and there's something that we lead our lives by. Now, unless there's any questions, I was just going to quickly touch on some of the customs of Shavuot. Ruth, did you have a question? You just took yourself on mute for fun. Okay, I'll put you back on mute so we don't. Shavuot is, there's a couple of customs I just want to mention. The first one is, there is a custom to stay up all night and study the Torah. And we do that because they say, the Midrash tells us that when God came down the mountain to hear the 10 Commandments, we all slept in, right? We thought we'd go to sleep and go in this spiritual lofty elevation, but actually we should have been awake early to hear it. So to remedy that bad thing we did, God says, stay up all night, learn the Torah, and make it happy. The other thing we do is we eat milking foods. We eat cheesecake, which is one of the famous ones. We eat anything to do with cheese or milking food. And there are a number of reasons for that. But the two main ones are, firstly, as we just said, we just got the Torah. So all the laws of meat and milk were all new to us. And a lot of our dishes were maybe not kosher because, mix meat and milk. So basically, it's easy to have milking foods. You can have vegetables, you can have fish. Nothing to do with meat and milk mixed together. So that's one of the reasons that we have milking foods. The other reason is because we know that Moses went up the mountain, as I described before, for 40 days, and he was basically angelic. Like he became like one of the angels. He didn't eat, he didn't sleep. So therefore we have these light type foods, which remind us that Moses also didn't eat. So obviously we can't fast for 40 days and 40 nights, but we can have lighter foods rather than our heavy meat, just to remind us that we are like angels as well. Interestingly, someone mentioned today that if we're going to be back in Shule for Yom Kippur, and we're only limited to like 50 or 100 people, he suggested that we run Yom Kippur for 5 days, and you can sign up to one of the days before Yom Kippur, but he said that the rabbi should fast for 5 days over those 5 days, and that was like a proper Yom Kippur for everybody. So thank you very much for that suggestion. But maybe we can change it to say we can eat milking foods, but not fast, because I don't think I can fast for 5 days. The other thing we do is, if we're back in Shul, we'll be decorating it with flowers, like Mt Sinai, which is decorated with flowers. So we do decorate the Shul as well. So even though Shavuot, just to finish off, because it's 8:30, is not one of the festivals that is, sort of, wow, everyone does Shavuot. If you probably asked a Gentile, at work, they've heard of Passover and Tabernacles and Hanukkah for sure, right? And Yom Kippur they've probably heard of because it's all on the nanny. But Shavuot is like, wow, what's that, right? So Shavuot is not one of those festivals that has all the cool traditions, but it is really important because it's the day that we heard the 10 Commandments, we accepted the Torah, our role as Jewish people, and we also got the oral tradition, the oral law of 630 Commandments, which is still with us today, which we still need and very much interpret. And I think that really separates, when someone says, what's it in Orthodox, Reform, Conservative, all these other types of Jews, what the Orthodox tradition is really to focus and put utmost importance on the written and the oral Torah, right? And as I said, the fundamentals are not up for interpretation. It's all the little things that can be interpreted and played with. The fundamentals are all there, and wherever you are in the world, and wherever the Torah is the same, the written Torah is the same, the oral Torah is the same. You don't find Jews in America that have a different type of tefillin or different type of shul structure or different type of wedding, right? All the fundamentals are there and it's all agreed upon. And I think this gives us confidence when we tell our children what it's all about. You don't have to say, oh, there's all these arguments to the rabbis. There's no arguments. We know what the Torah says, right? There's arguments about the little things, but the big things, the tradition is something that we've known for generations and generations, and it continues with us. And that is my 1 hour lecture, oral lecture to you. If you have any questions, got a thumbs up from Len, but please unmute yourself and please do ask. See the Nagel boys there? They're the ones that they're Talmud scholars over there. They're the ones that delve into it. Melanie, got any questions? Did I answer all your questions from the other day?
Yes, good, thanks. Good, thanks.
Thanks, Leonard.
I'll have to speak to you after because I don't want to talk to others, but that was great. Thank you.
Okay. Glad you enjoyed.
I think Alex trying to ask a question. You might need to unmute him.
Alec, do you have a question?
There are some people who don't know how to unmute their phones.
Hang on, okay, I'll unmute everybody. How about that? Just don't all stream it at the same time.
I see Alec is wanting to ask a question.
Unmute. Okay. Alec, I'm unmuting you.
Can you
Alec, you got a question?
Can you hear me?
I can, yes. Welcome.
Thank
Good to see you.
Hillel, according to the subject of your shiur is what did we receive on Mount Sinai? And from my understanding, it's that God gave us certain laws. Okay, that's what Moses brought down to us, the 10 Commandments and other laws. But everything else that comes after in our Jewish history is either opinions or commentaries. So these are the thoughts of rabbis. You know, who is going to argue they were right, they were wrong? You know, so what is our religion based on?
Okay. So let me summarize that. So I did try to answer that in my shiur, but I'll try again. So basically what we're saying is that the oral Torah and the written Torah were God given through Moses on Sinai. He brought it down for us. And really everything was, I have to mute you all because it's a bit noisy. Really everything that is fundamental to our religion has been passed on, and there is no argument amongst the rabbis about them. There's no argument about who is a Jew, what is the Torah, what is the Shabbat, what is tefillin, what is prayers. There's no argument, right? It's all what is a wedding, what is impure and not pure, right? We know the 613 commandments. There's no dispute about those, right? It's codified by the Maimonides. It's codified by other rabbis as well. 630 commandments are clear. We all know what they are. What they do argue about is some of the smaller sort of sub laws in that about how to do it properly. So my example I gave you was the chuppah. They argue about the minimum value required for the wedding ring, right? Now today it's easy. All our wedding rings are worth $100, right? So as a joke under the chuppah, when Rabbi Glazman I do a chuppah, Rabbi Glazman says, is this ring worth shave pruta, which means 5 cents? And I go, I'm sure, I have to look, I have to inspect it, right? But the fact is, we're over and above, right? On Shabbat, we know the laws of Shabbat. It's very clear what they are. Now, as you know, you've attended my other shiur, we were discussing about turning on a light on Shabbat. Now, in a nutshell, we know you can't turn on a light. The question is, how did we get there? You know, is it for this reason or for that reason or for that reason? So I think to answer your question is, the fundamentals are there. There's no arguments. It's the small laws that the rabbis tried to do just to get right. And sometimes they even make extra laws on top of it to make sure we definitely do something wrong, right? They make extra laws. So as an example, and we discussed this on the laws of Shabbat, and I keep going back to Shabbat, it's an easy one to use. The rabbis tell us that, the Torah tells us you can't carry 4 meters or 4 amot in a public domain, right? Easy, no discussion, you can't do it. The rabbis came and says, you know what, don't even carry 1 centimeter. So the rabbis added laws onto that just to make sure that we don't accidentally go over the law. Did that answer your question?
A little bit, but just to clarify one thing, from what I understand, that back in the old days, you didn't even need a ring. When you proposed to the lady in your life, all you needed was 2 witnesses to say, behold, you are consecrated unto me according to Moses and Israel.
Okay, very good. So, yes, you're asking a good question. So that is true. So the Gemara tells us there are actually 3 ways to marry a woman. You can do it with witnesses, you can do it with a document, or you can do it by living with her, right? They're the 3 ways. Now, tradition shows us how to run a chuppah. And what we actually do is we do all 3, right? We have a marriage document, we seclude them in a room, right? And we give them money, right? We give them a ring. So what you're saying is absolutely correct. There are fundamental rules of how to get married, but tradition over time has given us a way of doing things, but it doesn't override the tradition. It's just a way that we interpret it. So another one is prayer, for example, like that, right? So prayer, we know, used to be in the temple. And what they did was they went to the temple with their sacrifice and they gave it to the Kohen and he sacrificed it and they did their atonement. Eventually, what happened was when the temple was destroyed, we needed a way to pray. Now, in a nutshell, you don't need a siddur to pray. You don't need it. You can go into your room, right, and just sit by your bed, and not like a Christian, one of those things. You can sit by your bed like we see in the movies, right? We can sit on your bed and you can pray to God. You don't need a siddur, right? But the rabbis have given us a tradition of how to pray, and they gave us a siddur. And they said, we want you to do this every morning. Say the morning blessings, say the Shema, say its blessings, say the Amidah, sing Aleinu, sing Anim Zmirat, have a few choir songs in the middle. That's how we want you to pray. But that doesn't mean you can't add your own prayers to it, right? Which we're supposed to do. When you say the Amidah in Shule, it's silent. You're supposed to pray for whatever you want, right? So a lot of the laws are like that as well. So the fundamentals are there, but as it evolves, tradition comes up. How we run a Seder, for example, right? The Torah doesn't tell us you have to have Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, right? That's the rabbis put on as a tradition, as symbols and symbolic and customs. So there's a whole discussion about how customs came about. And that is really tradition along the way, right? For example, eating cholent on Shabbos, not a law, right? You don't have to have cholent on Shabbos, right? If you don't, you're not Jewish. If you don't eat cholent, you're not Jewish, right? We know that. But the fact is, there's no rule about having to eat cholent. But it's such a strong tradition, and it's really part of it. Making kiddush and all these types of things. So the fundamentals are there. Things evolve over time. And in fact, even today, the matzah we eat today didn't look like the matzah from a few hundred years ago, right? The matzah was probably soft and bent. Now, we've got machines that do it. It's all very different. But there's no question we have to eat matzah. The question is, what type of matzah do you have? Is it round? Is it square? Is it machine made? Is it handmade? Is it wholemeal? Is it spelt? All those types of things.
Okay.
But if you've got an example, I'm happy to go through it. If you want to test what we've learned of something you think we've made up.
Look, I know that our religion has expanded. It has changed from what it was before.
Yeah.
But there are certain limits to what we can change.
Yeah.
But certainly our religion should be one that will accept certain differences without calling us, you're not Orthodox anymore, you're now conservative. As long as we are not living in the 1600s, we are living in the 2000s now. And within reason, who is going to say, this rabbi says you can, and this rabbi says you can't. So what are you going to decide? What are you going to do? Because if you do a certain way, the rabbis will say, oh, you become a goy. You're not Jewish anymore. You're not Orthodox anymore. So who is going to pass the hechsher and say, no, it's permitted. You can do that. You can't do that.
Okay, so before I answer, I'm just going to stop the recording and say thank you everyone for joining us, and then I'm going to answer your question. Thank you, everybody. That was our shiur. Look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Don't go